I am presenting Union Gospel Press's Sunday School Lesson number 12, Sunday, August 17th, 2025. The lesson is entitled Trust the Lord. Lesson text comes from Proverbs chapter 3, verses 1 through 12. Related scriptures are Deuteronomy 18, 1 through 5, 30, 11 through 16, Psalms 25, 4 through 10, 111, 1 through 10, Hebrews 12, 5 through 11. The place is Jerusalem. The time is about 950 BC. In this lesson, we continue our unit on biblical doing. To act biblically, we need wisdom. Our lesson this week shows us the importance of trusting God's wisdom to guide us. Today's aim, facts. To learn the significance and necessity of the wisdom of God in our lives. Principle, to understand that right living comes from following the wisdom of God. Application, to stress that when we learn to trust God for His wisdom to guide us, He will show us how to live in His righteousness. Illustrating the lesson. We please God by trusting in His wisdom, not our own. Practical points. 1. Obedience goes deeper than externals. True obedience must be from the heart. Proverbs 3, 1 through 2. 2. Christians must cling to both mercy and truth. Verses 3 through 4. 3. God's mind is infinite and perfect. A human's is not. Therefore, we should trust Him. Verse 5. 4. We cannot acknowledge God with only part of our lives. Verses 6 through 8. 5. Honoring God first shows not only gratitude, but also faith that God will continue to provide. Verses 9 through 10. 6. God's discipline flows out of His love. Verses 11 through 12. Golden text. Trust in the Lord with all thine heart, and lean not unto thine own understanding. In all thy ways acknowledge Him, and He shall direct thy paths. Proverbs 3, 5 through 6. Today we have 3 lesson outlines. The first is honoring a father's teaching. Proverbs 3, 1 through 4. The second is following the Lord's direction. Proverbs 3, 5 through 10. And the third is profiting from the Lord's discipline. Proverbs 3, 11 through 12. Introduction. Our world has access to information as never before. Areas of the world once deprived of education now have easy access to information. Yet while learning is widespread, wisdom is rare. Wisdom goes beyond knowledge, for wisdom is the ability to apply knowledge to useful, right, and lasting goals. Although wisdom has many shades of meaning in the Bible, it has primarily an attribute of God and of those who are properly related to Him. God always pursues proper goals and means to accomplish His will. So also the truly wise person submits to mind of God as his own. Our theme this quarter has been Christ-like living. Christ Himself is the wisdom of God. While not all traditions are wise, those that imitate Christ are. This is the emphasis of our final unit on biblical doing. Honoring a father's teaching. Proverbs 3, 1. My son, forget not my law, but let thine heart keep my commandments. Verse 2. For length of days and long life and peace shall they add to thee. Verse 3. Let not mercy and truth forsake thee. Bind them around thy neck. Write them upon the table of thine heart. Verse 4. So shall thou find favor and good understanding in the sight of God and man, keeping His commands. Proverbs 3, 1 through 2. The book of Proverbs is devoted to moral instruction. It seeks to guide the young into wise living. Such wisdom comes from the fear of the Lord. The first 9 chapters are written by Solomon, who frequently addresses the reader as his son. While it is generally important that parents pass on wisdom to their children, we see that Solomon sought to specifically pass on to his son wisdom so that he might rule the realm in the fear of the Lord. Without wisdom, life degenerates into folly. Our passage shows how righteousness and wisdom are intertwined. A son is exhorted to honor his father's instruction, first by keeping his commands. Solomon wrote, "My son, forget not my law, but let thine heart keep my commandments." Proverbs 3:1. The word for law, Torah, often refers to the law of God. Here it refers to the Father's teaching, but the Father's law is based on the law of God, Deuteronomy 6:3-9. My commandments, Proverbs 3:1, personalizes the parts of the law the Father has taught. The Son is to keep those commands. The wording makes it clear that he is not only to memorize the precepts, but also to make them part of his character. The exhortation, so important in ancient Israel, is equally important today. Parents must firmly and lovingly impart God's truth to their children, and children must internalize and follow it. Living according to godly precepts brings benefits. For length of days and long life and peace shall they add to thee. Proverbs 3:2. Godliness and wisdom are conducive to a full and satisfying life. Deuteronomy 5:33, Proverbs 3:16. Peace, shalom, connotes prosperity, health, and tranquility. The same rewards are promised for those who keep the fifth commandment. Exodus 20:12, Ephesians 6:1-3. Those promises should not be taken as blanket statements without exceptions. Some obedient children die young. As a general principle, however, those who follow the godly wisdom of their parents do not subject themselves to many influences that shorten and degrade life. They enjoy a quality of life that the foolish never know. Practicing mercy and truth. Proverbs 3:3-4. A son honors his father not only by keeping his commands, but also by amplifying mercy and truth. Merciful is a frequent Old Testament description of God, especially in his covenant relationship with Israel. It speaks of a loyalty that entails the keeping of all commitments. Truth speaks of trustworthiness. The faithful son is never to allow those virtues to leave him. They are to accompany him throughout life. So closely should he cling to them that they are likened to a necklace around his neck and a tablet on his heart. The necklace may refer to a cylinder signet that hung around the neck and was used to sign documents. The tablet of the heart symbolizes the fact that mercy and truth become part of the son's nature. His identity is marked by those virtues. Once again, a reward follows favor and good understanding in the sight of God and man. Proverbs 3:4. Favor indicates a favorable disposition of God and man towards someone who exhibits mercy and truth. Good understanding is prudence. In that context, both God and man favor the one who understands that prudence. Our text is not implying that our motivation for kind and godly conduct should merely be a desire for a good reputation before God and man. It merely states that a person of integrity will be recognized as such. Nor does it imply that the good person will always be popular, but it does mean that even his enemies will have no legitimate grounds for bringing an accusation against him. Following the Lord's direction, verse 5. Trust in the Lord with all thine heart, and lean not unto thine own understanding. Verse 6. In all thy ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct thy paths. Verse 7. Be not wise in thine own eyes. Fear the Lord, and depart from evil. Verse 8. It shall be health to thy navel, and marrow to thy bones. Verse 9. Honor the Lord with thy substance, and with the first fruits of all thine increase. Verse 10. So shall thy barns be filled with plenty, and thy presses shall burst out with new wine. Trusting him. Proverbs 3, 5 through 6. Following a father's teaching implies not only a life of morality, but also one of trust. Trust in the Lord with all thine heart, Solomon wrote, verse 5. Trusting God with all one's heart involves resting on him without reservation, even when what he says does not make sense. This reminder is necessary because God's ways and thoughts surpass ours and often cannot be understood by the mortal mind. When this happens, we often try to reason things out instead of committing ourselves to his wisdom. For this reason, Solomon added, and lean not unto thine own understanding. Insight, perception, and discernment are desirable traits to have. 1, 2, 6, 4, 5 through 7. But our wisdom will always be less than God's perfect wisdom. Limited human understanding often fails to comprehend God's ways. Instead, said Solomon, in all thy ways acknowledge him. Verse 6. Acknowledging God involves knowing him. This is a call to recognize and know God in all the circumstances of life. We must recognize his presence in everything we do and acknowledge his lordship over every area of life. This is a difficult assignment, and it can be fulfilled only through the total trust commanded in the previous verse. Too often we regulate our knowledge of God to a corner of our lives and exclude him from the social, economic, and political dealings that occupy our time. If we call him Lord, we must take him into account in all our thoughts, words, decisions, and actions. If this seems impossible, let us not forget that he promises to help us in all these things and seek him in prayer. God delights to answer our prayers to know him better. Psalms 86:11. To those who acknowledge him in all they do, it is promised, he shall direct thy paths. Proverbs 3:6. God will make their paths straight or smooth. When we trust him wholeheartedly and include him in all our ways, he keeps us on the straight path and out of the crooked ways of sinners. Psalms 1. He also smooths the way, removing obstacles and hindrances that would keep us from achieving our godly goals. This does not mean we will never have trouble, but we will avoid many of the needless, self-inflicted difficulties that sin brings. Fearing him. Proverbs 3, 7 through 8. Solomon called attention to a critical thought, difficult aspect of following the Lord. Be not wise in thine own eyes. Fear the Lord and depart from evil. The first admonition is parallel to lean not unto thine own understanding, verse 5. Those who are wise in their own eyes unrealistically estimate themselves and may actually be fools. The pseudo-wisdom leads to all kinds of social evils. James 3, 14 through 16, Isaiah 15, 18 through 23. Despite the popularity of this verse, it is very easy to be wise in our own eyes. Who doesn't trust their own judgment? We are all inclined to trust ourselves, and many people reject faith because something doesn't make sense to them. But Shouldn't we expect an infinite God to sometimes be beyond our understanding? We would not expect to fit the ocean in a teacup, and we should not expect to grasp an infinite God with our finite minds. The antidote to self centered wisdom is to fear the Lord, Proverbs 3:7. This parallels trust in the Lord, verse 5. In this context, fear is reverence and awe arising out of a sense of God's transcendence and holiness. In light of God's overwhelming majesty, there is no place for self exaltation. All we have is a gift from God's grace. Fear of God results in a changed life. Depart from evil, verse 7. Godly fear and righteous living are inseparable. Leviticus 25:17, Deuteronomy 17:19. Reverential awe inspires a sense of accountability. By contrast, a small view of God encourages engaging in all kinds of sin. Romans 3:10 through 18. Fearing God and departing from evil shall be health to thy navel and marrow to thy bones. Proverbs 3:8. The imagery denotes the promise of health from your outermost navel to your innermost bone marrow. Both physical and mental well being comes to those who have a proper walk with God. This promise does not guarantee good health to all godly people, but it does indicate the beneficial influence that spiritual health has on one's physical well being. This influence is widely acknowledged today, even by the medical community. Everyone knows that stress impacts the body, for example. As another example, everyone knows that STDs severely impact a person's life, even if many who will not condemn the sins that spread those diseases. Obedience to God keeps young people away from influences and practices that harm body and mind. Worshiping Him. Proverbs 3:9 through 10. Trust and fear of the Lord are expressed in proper worship. A key aspect of worship is to honor the Lord with thy substance and with the first fruits of all thine increase. Here is a practical outworking of the spiritual attitudes of the preceding verses. Wisdom entails giving our best offerings to the Lord. Giving one's material goods is a way to honor the Lord, verse 9. Honoring God means upholding his reputation. This does not only through words, but also through actions and giving one's wealth. The Israelites were required to give various tithes and offerings to maintain worship. Leviticus 27:30, Deuteronomy 14:22 through 23. Prominent among these were the first fruits of all thine increase. Proverbs 3:9, Deuteronomy 26:1 through 11. The first ripened fruits were to be considered God's property and offered to him. This signified that he gave them not only their first, but also their best. Numbers 18:12 through 13. There is promise of reward for this generosity. So shall thy barns be filled with plenty, and thy presses shall burst out with new wine. Proverbs 3:10. Grain was stored in these barns. Those who honored the Lord would have full barns. The presses are stone vats used to press grapes. Those too would overflow. Though we do not live under those rules, the principles of honoring God through contributions to his work is still important. God does not promise to make faithful givers rich, but he does promise to supply their needs. Matthew 6:33, 2 Corinthians 9:6 through 11. If we are generous in our giving, God will give us enough to continue to be generous. 2 Corinthians 8:1 through 5. Profiting from the Lord's discipline, verse 11. My son, despise not the chastising of the Lord, neither be weary of his correction. Verse 12. For whom the Lord loveth, he correcteth, even as a father the son in whom he delighteth. Our passage urges us not to despise divine discipline. Proverbs 3:11. One may not be enjoying the benefits promised in the preceding verses. The path may not be smooth, verse 6. Health may not be good, verse 8. And we might not be prospering, verse 10. Accordingly, we should always consider the possibility that the Lord is chastening us, although this is not always the case. Job 1:8 through 22. Solomon instructed, despise not the chastening of the Lord, neither be weary of his correction. Proverbs 3:11. Chastening refers to correction for the purpose of instruction, leading to change. It differs from vengeance, which is merely exacting punishment for evil deeds. We are also warned in this verse not to despise correction. We must not take it lightly or reject it as unimportant, nor are we to be weary of it, treating it with loathing or disgust. Those are normal human reactions. Some treat God's discipline as nothing more than bad luck. Others accuse God of being uncaring and unjust. Neither of those responses looks beyond the circumstances to examine their possible meaning. The spiritual sensitive person, however, seeks God's perspective, knowing that whom the Lord loveth, he correcteth. Verse 12. Job puzzled over why God would take enough notice of humans even to make them suffer. Job 7:17 through 19. Here is the answer. It is paradoxically his love for someone precious that causes him to take the trouble to refine that person. Just as a loving parent does not allow a child to play with sharp knives, our loving Father does not simply allow us to play with sin. Solomon likened God's dealings to the discipline of a father. He deals with us as a son in whom he delighteth. Proverbs 3:12. The fathers love his son and refuses to abandon him to his whims. For a good parent, this hurts me as much as it hurts you is true. God does not enjoy disciplining us, but he does so because he loves us. Indeed, discipline is a proof of our legitimate sonship. Hebrews 12:5 through 11. Solomon reminds us that a wise person is a righteous person. Honoring our parents' godly teaching, following the Lord's direction, and profiting from his discipline will enable us to find fulfillment in the joys of godly living. Questions 1. How should a son respond to his father's instruction? 2. How should we interpret the promise that obedient children will live a long and satisfying life? 3. Mercy and truth are to be written on the tablet of the heart. What does that mean? 4. Mercy and truth bring favor with men. Does that imply popularity? 5. If God gave us our minds, why can we not lean on our own understanding? 6. What does it mean to acknowledge God in all our ways? 7. What does it mean to fear God? How does that change our lives? 8. Does God promise to make generous saints rich? Explain. 9. What attitudes should we avoid when the Lord disciplines us? 10. If God loves us as much as the Bible says he does, why does he take us through hardship? This concludes the Sunday School lesson for Sunday, August 17th, 2025. Thank you for listening. Please remember to click the subscribe tab. God bless.